Okay, the history is like this. The history is that the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, lived in Russia, and he was the chief rabbi of the city of the Dnepropetrovsk. And well, then it was changed to, correct me somebody, then it was changed to, I forget. In any case,
Yekaterinoslav.
Oh, no, first was Yekaterinoslav, then it was changed, right? I think so.
Then it was changed back to Yekaterinoslav, and then it was changed to Dnieper.
Okay, so you get the point. Big city in Ukraine. Big city in Ukraine. He was the chief rabbi there, and eventually in 1939 he was arrested by the communists, and he was exiled to Kazakhstan, to a little town about 100 miles from Alma-Ati, however they pronounce it. Long story short, he didn't have any, you couldn't buy anything in that town, and you couldn't buy paper and you couldn't buy pens. So the only thing he had to write, he lived there for 5 years until he passed away in exile. And that's where he's buried. He's buried in the big city of Almaty in Kazakhstan. In any case, he had 3 books with him. He had a Chumash, he had a Tanya, and he had a Zohar. And what he did is he would write on the margins of the books and use that as paper. And how did he get ink? He couldn't buy ink, so his wife would go to collect herbs, and she would make ink. And that's why she only had a little bit of ink. So every paragraph is a different color. And that's how he wrote. And he had very little paper, but again, the margins of the books is all he had. Then he passed away. Years and years later, these books made their way out of Russia in 1970. So the Rebbe got a hold of it in 1970. And in 1970, the Rebbe would, from 1970 and on, the Rebbe would often quote his father's teachings, and he would explain it in the light of Hasidism. So you have 3 layers, because primarily what Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father, was a great Kabbalist. Primarily he wrote on the Zohar. So the Zohar, you have 1 layer of Kabbalah, then you have the way it was explained by the Rebbe's father, and then further explained by the Rebbe himself. And years later, they collected all those talks and they published a series of books on this. So it's a little bit esoteric. Parts of it is very esoteric because it's Kabbalistic. It's not explained at great length, but with the Rebbe's commentary, it's a little bit easier to understand. So I think we'll sample one of these teachings, the layers, starting from the Zohar, which is really a commentary on the Torah. So you have the Torah, you have the Zohar, you have the Rebbe's father, and then you have the Rebbe. 4 layers of commentary. We'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. We may have time for more than one nugget, but we'll start with the first nugget, and then we'll see from there. So it discusses it's part of the story of the golden calf, this week's parsha. But if you look at the story, you don't have to read it inside, but if you want to, you could look at it. It is chapter 33. You know what? Maybe I'll bring it up. Why not? The public service. Bring it up. Okay, did I freeze or am I frozen or am I?
We can see you, but you're frozen.
Okay, so let's see.
And we can hear you, but you're frozen.
It's gonna have to warm up a little bit.
Well, it's over 32 degrees outside.
Okay. So
There we go.
Let's try the other camera. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here we have chapter 33 in Exodus. Let me just share the chapter. So this is chapter 33. Okay. So what happens is the Jewish people already made the golden calf. Moses descended, broke the tablets, and then speaks to God, tries to get forgiveness, tells God the famous verse, if you're not going to forgive the people, erase me from your name. That happens all in chapter 32. Chapter 33 is God tells Moshe, the beginning of chapter 33, is God tells Moses, go ascend from here, you and the people you have brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey, because I will not go up in your midst, since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way. So in other words, if you heard that God is going to send a guardian angel before you to get rid of your enemies, I would be happy, but the people weren't happy because they understood what that meant. God said, I'm sending an angel because I don't want to go in your midst because they sinned. And the people are sad about this. They mourn. Verse 4, when the people heard this bad news, they mourned, and no one put on his finery. They didn't put on their jewelry. And God says, well, I'm not going to go with you. And the reason for that is verse 5, and the Lord said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. If I go up into your midst for one moment, I will destroy you. In other words, if I'm in your midst and you sin, God says, I may get offended, I may destroy you. So it's better if I'm actually not with you. See, the closer you are to God, the more dangerous it is, so to speak, because God is more exacting from the people who are close to him. So God says, better I won't go with you. And that's what happens. Ve'ata, he says, I will destroy you. But now leave off your finery, and I will know what to do to you. The children of Israel divested themselves of their finery from Mount Horaib, which is Mount Sinai. What does this mean? So it doesn't only mean they took off their jewelry in a sign of mourning, but the Medrash says that when the Jewish people stood at Sinai and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear, they get 2 crowns. The angels come and give 2 crowns and put 2 crowns on the head of each Jewish person. And now they give it up. So what that basically means, if you want to speak practically, it means that there is spiritual energy and spiritual refinement that was gifted to them at Sinai that now they lose because of this experience of the sin. Okay. What does Moses do? Moses, now, if God is not living amongst the people, Moses also doesn't live amongst the people. He separates his tent and he puts it outside the camp. Now, by the way, I just want to tell you that there's an end to the story. Later on in this parsha, Moshe tells God, I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere unless you come with us. Okay? And that really happens a few verses later. Verse 12, Moses renegotiates. And Moses says, right, if you skip to verse 12, and now Moses said to the Lord, look, you say to me, bring this people up, but you have not informed me whom you will send with me. And you said, I have known you by the name, and you have also found favor in my eyes. Verse 13, and now, if I have indeed found favor in your eyes, pray, let me know your ways so that I may know you, so that my favor, so that I may find favor in your eyes, and consider that this nation is your people. So he says, my presence will go and I will give you rest. Verse 15, and he said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not take us up from here. So there's some negotiation here. Moshe wants to see, he wants to know what's happening. Tell me your ways. And understand that this is your people. You can't just run away. And God says, okay, my presence will go with you. Unlike he said before that my angel. And Moses says, wonderful, because if you don't come with us, don't take us away from here. In other words, we're not moving. We're not going to Israel with an angel. We want God himself. And God agrees with that, as you see in verse 16 and 17. Okay, so it's renegotiated. But in the beginning, after the sin, God says, I'm not staying with the people because it's too dangerous. If I get too close to the people, it may be dangerous. Okay, fine. Now, what happened? What was the part that I skipped? The part that I skipped is verse 7. And Moses took the tent and pitched it for himself outside the camp, distancing it from the camp. And he called it the tent of meeting. And it would be that anyone seeking the Lord will go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. And it would be that when Moses would go out of the tents, all the people would rise and stand, each one at the entrance of his tent, and they would gaze after Moses until he went into the tent. So here you have the vision. The people sinned. God says, I don't want to be with the people. In other words, I'll send my angel. It's fine. I forgive you. I'll send my angel to help you, but I'm not going with you. Moses says, if God's not here, I'm not here. And Moses takes his tent and puts it outside the camp. And he says, it's a tent of meeting. What does it mean? Anyone who wants to meet God should come here. Moshe would leave the camp toward his tent. Everybody would watch how Moshe walks out. That's the scene. That's the vision. Okay, wonderful. That's the verse. So we covered one layer. Actually not, because even this layer, it's not so clear what this layer is saying. Now, the big question here is, the big controversy here is the three-way controversy. I don't want to get too detailed here. The question is, what tent are we talking about? Are we talking about Moses' own tent? Or are we talking about the Ohel Moed, what we're going to call later the tent of meeting, right? What does it say? It says, verse 7, Moses took the tent and pitched it for himself outside the camp, distancing it from the camp, and he called it the tent of meeting. Now, when you hear tent of meeting, when you hear Ohel Moed, what do you think of? Well, Ohel Moed, starting from the end of the second book and the beginning of the third book, Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, is always the Mishkan. It's the tabernacle. It's the temple that they built in the desert. So did Moshe take his own tent, or did Moshe take the tent of meeting? In other words, did he take the tabernacle? So there's a big debate here. It's a three-way debate, because there's a big debate when the temple was built, when the tabernacle was built, before the sin or after the sin. So without getting into this whole debate, I'm just going to tell you that the Zohar is of the opinion that this verse is referring to the tent of meeting. This verse is referring to the temple. Moshe took the temple and put it outside the camp, distanced it from the camp. And he called it the tent of meeting. That's how the Zohar reads this. Okay, fine. So now we know what the verse says according to the Zohar. Now let's see what the Zohar says about this verse. So far, so good. Everything clear? Okay, says the Zohar as follows. And this is a beautiful observation that I have not known about till yesterday, but it's right there. You can't miss it.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Can I ask one question?
Of course.
When I tuned in late, and I apologize for it, but when you define the tabernacle, what is the tabernacle?
So the tabernacle is the Mishkan, the portable temple that the Jewish people built for God in the desert. So the second half of the book of Exodus tells us about the slavery in Egypt, the Exodus, and how they receive they leave Egypt, they receive the Torah at Sinai, and then God commands the Jewish people, make a temple for me in the desert. So it's portable, and it has all the features of the temple in Jerusalem, but it's portable. So it's got the vessels, in other words, the furniture, the ark, the menorah, the table, etc., the altar. But the key feature is that it's portable, and therefore they call it a tent. And for the 40 years that the Jewish people were in the desert, the tent was the center of the camp, and God spoke to Moses from the tent of meeting, as we read in the beginning of the third book of the Torah. And so here we're talking about Moshe says he takes his tent and he puts it out of the camp. Which is his tent? Is it his personal tent where he lives, or is it the tent, God's tent, which is the temple? Now, I would think it's his tent, but it says he called his tent the tent of meeting. Right. Now, the tent of meeting is the word we use to refer to God's tent. So therefore, Rashi, I'm not going to get into disagreements here. Rashi says it's his own tent. And Rashi says tent of meeting just means that's the people, whoever wants to study Torah would meet there, right? But that's the Rashi, that's not the Zohar. The Zohar says, no, they were talking about the actual temple. Moshe took the temple and put it outside the camp. Now, outside the camp doesn't have to mean it wasn't in the center of the camp, because later we're going to learn that it's the center of the camp. What we mean that there's a distance between the camp and the temple. The temple was in the center, and then there was empty space, and the Jewish people camped around the temple, but from a distance. So that's what the Zohar seems to be saying, that Moshe took his tent and the tent of God and actually put it in a distance from the rest of the people as a result of the sin.
And inside the temple, just to get clarification, was the Torah or inside his tent?
Inside the temple, there were all kinds of vessels, a menorah, a table with bread, but the innermost chamber of the temple was the ark, and the ark had the 10 commandments. Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So now, tent of meeting. Says the Zohar, got to pull up the verse. Verse 7, and Moses took the tent and pitched it out for himself outside the camp, distancing it from the camp. And he called it the tent of meeting, which means, says the Zohar, this is the first place where the tent is referred to, the tent of meeting. In other words, up till that now, if you look at the Torah, even though we had 2 portions where the Torah discusses the commandment to build the temple, it was never called the tent of meeting until this point. Says the Zohar. Up till now, it's not called the tent of meeting. So the Zohar says, yes, correct. Before the sin, the temple was called Ohel, which is tent. After the sin, it's called Ohel Moed, tent of meeting. We'll see in a minute that it's not so simple because the word Moed has many, many meanings. But when the Zohar makes an observation, he says we always refer to it as a tent of meeting. Understand that that term was first coined, was first used after the sin. Okay, is that good or bad? So the Zohar says there are 2 opinions. There is Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Abba. 2 opinions, two Talmudic sages, 2 sages of the era of the Mishnah. And they say, my Moed, what is Moed? Tent of meeting. What does meeting mean? You'll see, it doesn't mean meeting necessarily, but what does the word Moed mean? So he says, one says it's positive and one says it's negative. You already have 2 Jews. You already have 2 opinions. This is either very good or very bad. I don't know what it is, right? We're not sure what it is. We're learning the Zohar. This is the inner dimension of the Torah. So at least we would think, I understand if the Talmud is disagreeing with the Zohar. But the Zohar says, this point, now finally, after the sin, the tent is called a tent of meeting. Is it good or bad? We don't know. It's either very good or very bad. Okay, so I'm so far just reading the Zohar. Remember, we still have another 2 layers to read after that. So far, I'm just trying to translate the Zohar. But here you have to get a little bit into the word of Hebrew, into the Hebrew. What does Moed mean? Anybody want to help me? What does Moed mean? Anyone know a little Hebrew?
Does it mean
when you think of Moed, what do you think of?
Doesn't it Omed like stand?
Moed. Okay, that's related, but that's not what the word means. What does the word mean? I don't mean the etymology. I mean the word itself. What does Moed mean? So first thing is Moed is meeting. I said that's one possibility. Ohel Moed, tent of meeting. But Moed in the Bible also means the holidays, right? You say Moadim l'simcha, holidays for joy. In the book of Eila Moed Hashem. In the book in the 3rd book, you hear Eila Moadei Hashem. These are the festivals of God. So Moed is a festival. Why is Moed a festival? Because Moed also means an appointed time. So far we have 3 definitions for Moed. 2 of them are related. Moed is either a place of meeting. So Moed is a meeting, a place of meeting. Moed can also mean an appointed time. Now they go together because a meeting, usually when you call a meeting, even in my calendar from Google Calendar, that right away you put in the meeting, they say, what's the location, right? Where do you want to put in? You have an option. I'm not plugging Google. I mean, I am, but you see what I'm saying? I'm saying built into the feature is you have a meeting. What's the location? So a meeting means today's no problem. You meet on Zoom. It's not a problem. But in the real world, you have to meet in a location. So you have a time and you have a place. So tent of meeting is the place, but a Moed can also mean an appointed time.
So is
And
this
therefore, the holiday is also referred to Moed because a holiday is an appointed time, is a special time. So I gave you 3 definitions of Moed, there may be more.
so is that like God being called Makom and meaning place and time also?
God is the source of the place. Hine makom iti. God is not in this week's parsha. Oh, God is called makom. God fills the space. In this week's parsha, God says, Hine makom iti. There is a place with me. In other words, when you call God the place, you refer to him as the God who fills the place. But in reality, this week's parsha is that God says, the place is with me. In other words, he is not the place, he transcends space. But yes, God is God as the creator of space. But and time, but the word makom is exclusively space. Moed is more general. It can include time and space, because meeting could mean the time of meeting, or it could mean the place of meeting. So when you say the tent of meeting, you mean the tent where the place where they met. When you say the holiday, you say Moed is an appointed time, the time to meet. So which one is it? It could be both. So it could either mean Moed. We have three definitions. More are coming. Don't worry. So we have either tent of meeting, either meeting or appointed time, or holidays. Go ahead, Vicky.
Oh, I was just wondering if that happens after the sin, after Hashem said that he cannot be too close because he punish people because they're so stiff-necked. Is that because he wants to separate?
Yeah, sometimes if you
And
they say the best relationship.
Special place and time, space and time where we can actually meet. And this is the model that we live it right now.
Okay, so that's the negative approach. Hang on to that thought. That's the negative. Hang on. In other words, God doesn't want to see us. He says, you know what? I'll meet you once a year on a vacation resort. I'll meet you on Thanksgiving dinner once a year, and the rest of the year I don't want to talk to you. Right? That's basically the negative approach.
I didn't want to take it. I was just wondering because that's so.
Okay, but because we have layers, we'll see that
we don't want to live in that mode. We don't want to live now in this mode.
I'm sorry?
Now we don't want to live in this mode. That's why I'm bringing that up.
Right. But what you'll see in a moment, if we have time, what the Rebbe does is the negative becomes the positive. So everything is going to be upside down, but that we need some time for that. Hopefully we can do it in 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to continue reading the Zohar. By the way, when you read the Zohar, you don't have to understand. It's Zohar, it's Kabbalah. So if you understand, it's just a bonus. So I'm reading. So again, we have the Zohar establishes that he says, till now the tent was not called the tent of meeting, it was called the tent. I'm not going to say a tent of meeting. I'll say Ohel Moed, because Moed can mean meeting. Okay, maybe I will say it. We'll see. So he says, till now it was not called Ohel Moed. It was not called the tent of meeting, only after the sin. So what does that mean? What is that addition of Moed? Rabbi Eliezer says it's positive. Rabbi Abba says it's negative. So let's start with the positive. Rabbi Eliezer says it's positive. What is Moed? This is like saying the tent of a holiday. I said one definition of tent is a holiday. Moed, a special time, a unique time. So just like the Moed is a Yom Chedva, is a day of joy for the moon. He says moon, but he really means Malchut. He means the Kabbalistic attribute of Malchut. In other words, what is the holiday? Most holidays is the 15th day of the month. The 15th day of the month, the moon is complete. The moon is the Shekhinah. The moon is a metaphor for the energy of God that descends into this world. So in other words, the holiday is positive. There's nothing negative on the holiday. There's joy, there's holiness, and there's no pegam, there's no diminishment, right? If you look at the moon, which is a metaphor for the Shekhinah, every other night you see later, in other words, after the 15th and before the 15th, the moon is missing something. But on the 15th, which is the first day of Passover and the first day of Sukkot, the moon is full. So when you say holiday, Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, what do you mean? You mean that it's joy. It is a place of joy. It's a place of holiness and a place that there's no pagam, there's no diminishment. So why does Moshe refer to it in the name Ohel Moed? To show that the tent of meeting was not affected by the sin. In other words, the Jewish people sin and they descend, and they're not on the level they were on from Sinai. At Sinai, they got their jewelry. Now they have to check in their jewelry. In other words, the additional energy and additional holiness that they attained at Sinai, they have to return. That's what the verse says. So make no mistake, that was only the Jewish people outside the tent. But what Moshe is saying is he now names this tent the tent of holiday, not the tent of meeting. Ohel Moed, tent of holiday. Holiday is a time of joy, holiness, completeness. In other words, the tent is shielded from the negativity. In other words, when you come to the tent of the holiday, you're now in the state of holiness, just like you were before the sin. So according to Rabbi Elazar, this is positive. In other words, there is a space, which is like a holiday, where the effect of the sin does not take effect.
But how come it's positive if it's only on holidays?
First of all, I don't have to explain. It's the Zohar. I don't have to understand it. No, I'm kidding. It's always positive and negative. You'll see the negative in a minute. But the point is, what are we emphasizing? What is Moshe emphasizing? You have marketing, right? You hire a marketing firm. So you're not going to change the product. The product, it is what it is. The question is, are you highlighting the feature that it's missing? If you have something good in a specific place, so are you going to highlight that nowhere else has it, or are you going to highlight that this place does have it? You see what I'm saying? So the question is, when Moshe said, we know what the reality is. The reality is, we know the reality. The question is, what is Moshe highlighting? So according to the first opinion, Moshe is highlighting, you come to this tent is amazing. What's so amazing? It's a holiday. What does it mean it's a holiday? Now, I don't mean that it only happens once a year. No, anytime you come to this tent, it's a special day. Because in this tent, the effect of the sin does not take effect. The holiness that we attained before the sin, we could now recreate in the tent of meeting when we stand in front of God. I shouldn't call it tent of meeting, tent of holiday. So Vicky says, why only on holidays? No, anytime you come to this tent, the tent is a holiday. You don't go to the tent every day. That's your problem. But in other words, the tent is Moed, tent is a holiday. So the word Moed is positive. That's according to Rabbi Eliezer. Says Rabbi Abba, no. Rabbi Abba says it's all bad. Why is it all bad? He says, till now, he says tent, Moed means meeting. Moed means appointed time. I said holidays, appointed time. Appointed time by definition means it's not permanent, it's temporary. So he says, up till this point, the temple was called a tent, and the tent means it is continuous. It's always. He quotes a verse from Isaiah, a tent that whose foundation will stand forever. In other words, the tent is not meant to be, it's supposed to be permanent. You can have a permanent tent. But now when Moshe refers to it as Ohel Moed, the tent of an appointed time, says Rabbi Abba, what Moshe is really saying is it's only temporary. What is he highlighting? The effect of the sin. The sin did affect the temple. And he says like this, he says, in the beginning, before the sin, the temple was supposed to give everybody long life. There'll be no death. There's a medrash that says that death was decreed upon man at the sin of the golden cat, at the sin of the tree of knowledge. But the medrash says that at Mount Sinai, the unholiness, the effect of the tree of knowledge ceased, and they were like before the sin, so they would not die. And only when they served the idol, that's when the unholiness returned. In other words, says Rabbi Abba, the one who says this is negative, it's a tent it's a tent of appointed time. It's a temporary tent. You were supposed to live forever. Now you don't live forever. And he quotes an interesting thing. He says that in the Talmud, in rabbinic literature, how do you call a cemetery? Beit Moed l'chol chai, a house of appointed time for every living being. In other words, a cemetery reminds you that you're mortal, that you have a specific amount of time. So Ohel Moed, the word Moed is used in the context of a cemetery. It's crazy. In other words, the tent of meeting means it's a temporary tent, and because it's a result of the sin. And then he says another point. In the beginning, the tent was did not have any pagam, did not have any deficiency, but now the tent does have a deficiency. And the deficiency is the word moed is also could come from the word to break, to stumble. I'm sorry. In Tehillim, in Psalms chapter 18, it says ma'adu karsulai, ma'adu. Even in modern Hebrew, lim'od. Even in modern Hebrew, lim'od is to stumble. So to stumble is to break, to fall. So he says the word temple could be read the tent of stumbling. Okay, very negative. And then he says finally what Vicky said, Moed is appointed time. So it says in the beginning there was supposed to be a chavruta, a friendship, and a zivug and a unity. But when he says zivug, he means marital union. He means a marital union, and it was supposed to be ongoing. Because what is it? What is the temple? The temple is really the place of the marriage of the Jew and God. So this is a marriage. The marriage was supposed to be ongoing, but now because of the sin, it's not consistent. It's only temporary. At times we have this union with God, but before the sin, it was not temporary. It was permanent. The bond was permanent. So that's the Zohar. Now the question is what we do with the Zohar. Again, just to summarize very quickly, we have the verse. The verse says, Ohel Moed. After the sin, Moshe refers to the tent. He refers to it as the tent of meeting. Wonderful. What as tent of meeting. So the Zohar says, what does tent of meeting mean? What does Moed mean? Is it so there's two opinions. One is that it's positive, one that it's negative. The one that is positive, he says, Moed doesn't mean tent of meeting, means the holiday. This is an amazing tent. When you come to the temple, you are now in a new environment that was not affected by the sin. It's full of joy, it's full of holiness, and there's no deficiency. Amazing features, right? And that's what Moshe was trying to highlight according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. The other rabbi, Rabbi Abba says, no. Rabbi Abba says, no, Moshe was highlighting the problem, the deficiency. We used to live forever. Now, because of the sin, we only live a temporary life. We used to have no stumbling. Now we stumble. We used to have the union with God, the zivug, the union with God used to be permanent, and now it's only temporary, positive or negative. Okay, even this is good. If I send you home now, it's good. You have a verse and you have two interpretations from the Zohar, how to read this verse. I'm telling you, for me, this was news. I never realized that the term Ohel Moed was coined in the context of the sin. But that's the Zohar's opinion. Okay, now I'm going to skip a little bit of the Rebbe's father because it gets very Kabbalistic. Basically, he talks about why does one rabbi go for the positive and one for the negative? So he explains how one rabbi's root is in the sphere of chesed, of kindness. So he sees the good in everything, where the other rabbi's root is in gvura. Gvura is strength and discipline. So the other rabbi is rooted in discipline, and therefore, when he sees a sin and he sees something that the negative result of the sin, he doesn't ignore it, and he says, "This is the problem. This is the negative result of sin. This is judgment. This is discipline." And then he explains why he brings three verses to the three examples of negativity, because there's three levels of discipline. We're not going to go into that right now because we have 4 minutes left, and that will take an hour. So we'll leave that alone. We'll go straight to the Rebbe's interpretation. Again, we got 3 layers. By the way, I didn't tell you that when you go to the Chabad library in Brooklyn, so occasionally they have what do they call them? They have exhibits that you can see. You can actually see the Zohar that the Rebbe's father wrote in, and you can see the paragraphs that are written on the margins, and you could see the different colors, literally, because that was the different colors of ink that his wife made for him in the early 1940s in Kazakhstan. I've seen it in the library. Absolutely fascinating. In any case, so now we're going to go to the Rebbe's interpretation. The problem is, once you get to the Hasidic interpretation, the Hasidim are allergic to anything negative. So the Hasidism has to say that what the Zohar says is negative. Oh, no. Negative is more positive than positive. Everything has to be turned on its head. So that's what the Rebbe's question is. The Rebbe taught the Zohar in 1987, and he said, 1 second. You have a beautiful interpretation. Rabbi Eliezer came and he said that what a beautiful verse. Ohel Moed is a positive interpretation. It means the place of holiday, the place with joy, place of holiness, the place where there's no deficiency, no failure. Beautiful. Why does Rabbi Abba come and all of a sudden have to look for a negative interpretation? It's like he's the party pooper. Everything was going so wonderful. He said, what a beautiful interpretation of how beautiful, what Ohel Moed means. No, he says Ohel Moed is negative. It's a place of where we die. In other words, it highlights the fact that we don't live forever. It highlights the fact that we stumble and fail, and it highlights the fact that our unity with God, our marriage with God, is not ongoing. It's not consistent. It's not ongoing, but it only happens occasionally. Why ruin the party? So the Rebbe is going to say that really, and you have to understand that when you say negative, it's only negative superficially. Deep down, to the contrary, the negativity has a certain advantage. So after Rabbi Eliezer said that it's for good, Rabbi Abba adds an additional layer, and he says there's even a greater good. What is the greater good? What appears to be negative. And here the Rebbe explains a little bit of what he's going to do. But let's talk about these three steps. So we have death, we have breaking, and we have the union not being ongoing. So let's first talk about death. What's so good about dying? So the Talmud says, actually the Zohar says, that death represents, it's not just literal death, but death means if you fall from your level. If a person is on a high spiritual level and you fall from this level, it's considered death, a minor form of death. Okay. However, there is a verse that says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, that says that Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'kam, a righteous person has to stumble 7 times before he could stand up straight. And Hasidic philosophy explains that if you don't have failure, you're not going to grow. Why? You could be on a very high level, but before you can move to a completely new level, you have to break the old model, right? Anytime there's I always say this, anytime there's a breakthrough. So there's 2 ways to advance. One way is to advance little by little, but then there's another way where people advance exponentially. So there's a breakthrough. There's a new way of looking at something, a new way of solving a problem. Now, the problem with the new way of solving the problem is that all the experts don't like the new way, because all the experts have the old way of looking at the problem. And then you need somebody who's willing to say that all my expertise is actually wrong or not complete, and be open to say, I don't know anything about the subject, and look at it from a fresh pair of eyes, and that's where a breakthrough happens. So when the verse says, when King Solomon says a righteous person has to fall down 7 times, it means 7 times he's going to have a nefila, he's going to have a breaking. In other words, he loses his old perspective. And in between, before he finds the new perspective, there's a moment of loss, there's a moment of pain, there's a moment of spiritual death, there's a moment where you don't feel connected. So on the surface, that looks negative, but the Rebbe says that's where the growth happens. The metaphor is from a seed. You take a seed, you put it into the earth. Before the seed can become a tree, it has to germinate. When it germinates means it's almost rots, it loses its form. And this is the way spiritual growth happens. It doesn't happen step by step. It's not a ladder. When you're growing, there's gonna reach you're gonna reach a time where you feel that you're neither here nor there, that you're not connected at all. And really, that's the time where you're actually growing. It's, if you want to speak simple English, you could call it writer's block. What happens at writer's block or creative block? What happens is you have your way of looking at something, but before something new could happen, you have to get stuck. So you go to the library or you go to the bookstore. You have books and books and books on how to solve the writer's block, how to solve the creative block. But from the perspective of the Kabbalah, it's not a problem to be solved. You have to have that frustration. You have to have that death. You have to have that point where I have nothing to say before you can come up with a new idea. So says the Rebbe, the first guy, Rabbi Eliezer, says, the temple is a beautiful place. There's no pain. There's no death. You never fall. You're always on your level. Everything is fine. Yeah, but if everything is fine, if you don't fall, then you don't grow. So Rabbi Eliezer is adding, no, he says it's negative. Moshe emphasizes that the temple, this level of the temple is a level where you could die. It means you could descend from your level, but descending from your level will allow you to reach a higher level. There's a very interesting story in the Talmud that the Rebbe quotes here, is that there was a great sage, Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera lived in Babylonia, and he wanted to go to Israel. But the problem was he couldn't go because his teacher, Rabbi Yehuda, didn't believe you're allowed to go from Babylonia to Israel because of a verse. Without getting into this whole story, the bottom line, what's necessary for us, Rabbi Zera, once he decided to disobey his teacher and go to Israel, he fasted 100 fasts. And he says, I want to forget everything I learned, all the Babylonian Talmud. Why? Because when you go to the Jerusalem Talmud, they had a different style of learning. And if I have a new style of learning, the old style actually will hinder me. So he prayed to God, and God helped him, that he forgot everything he knew. And he wanted to come to Jerusalem like an open book. That's a descent. That's death. That's forgetting the old model. But ultimately, that's the possibility for greater growth. And the same thing is the next step. He quotes the verse that Moed means like breaking. So breaking, a broken heart. Humility is the key to growth. If I think I have all the answers, I think I'm complete, I'm never going to grow. And finally, we talk about the zivug. We talk about the unity, the intimacy, the intimate union between God and the Jewish people that the temple represents. And according to the Kabbalah, this happens during prayer. According to the Kabbalah, when we pray to God, there's the zivug, there's the unity that happens at multiple levels without getting into the Kabbalistic levels of Za and Malchut, the masculine sphirot and the feminine sphirot that unite. When we pray, it's also us and God. The person and God have an intimate union when we pray. However, before the sin, that intimacy was ongoing, was constant. Now the intimacy is not constant. It only happens occasionally, 3 times a day. So now the question is that a descent or an ascent? Is that good or bad? So Rabbi Eliezer says Rabbi Abba says it's bad. But the Rebbe says, what do you mean it's bad? It's negative, but that negativity actually leads to an advantage. What's the advantage? The advantage is that because there's a retreat, because the union is not ongoing, now when you reconnect, you could reconnect with a deeper longing. You could reconnect with a deeper passion. So actually the distance will actually create and increase the passion. And therefore, the takeaway here is, make no mistake, it's like the Rebbe says, like the advantage of teshuvah over someone who never sinned. Someone who never sinned, okay, he loves God, but there's no passion. If I felt the pain of being distant from God, then now my desire to come close to God is much deeper. So in short, let's just summarize and then just package it and make it into a soundbite and send this off to the week, to Shabbos. What's happening is like this. We have the Zohar. The Zohar says that Ohel Moed, tent of meeting, is either good or bad. Rabbi Eliezer says bad. I'm sorry, Rabbi Eliezer says good. A tent of the holiday. Tent of the holiday. Holiday's beautiful. Joy, no pain, full moon, wonderful. Then Rabbi Abba says no. Rabbi Abba says it's negative. So the Rebbe says negative. Why does Rabbi Abba have to ruin the party? So we say no, the negative is actually positive. The fact that there's pain, the fact that there's separation, the fact that the union with God, we cannot have a consistent unity with God. We're going to retreat. That retreating, that pain, that brokenness allows for a deeper, more passionate relationship to follow. And this is, of course, true in our relationship with God, but in every difficulty we face in our life. Anytime we have a difficulty in our life, we could look at it as negative, or we could do what the Rebbe just did and said, no, the retreat is the opportunity to grow in a healthier, stronger, more spiritually sensitive, more spiritually aware way. And ultimately, you would not be able to grow, and the tzaddik would not be able to go to the new level had he not had that original failure. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a story in short. I think this is beautiful. I enjoyed it. I hope you did. Of course, the takeaway is that the Hasidism has no ability to see anything bad. So the bad, there's good and there's bad, which is really super good. But that's another story. Any questions, comments, please share. Jokes, anything you want to add? Otherwise, wonderful Shabbos, wonderful day. See you next Friday with another segment of the Hasidic philosophy. Toda rabba. Thank you.
Toda rabba, Rabbi. Rabbi, I think it also ties in with the concept of shattering the tablets, right?
Very good. So why do we preserve the shattered tablets? Because the breaking is actually the opportunity for growth. Correct. Yeah. But the Zohar says, but the Zohar says it in the context of attentive meeting. In other words, ongoing, right? And it's also more broad. It's like our whole relationship with God. Do we have a constant relationship or a temporary relationship? The fact that I cannot maintain that unity to God that I have during prayer, the fact that I can't maintain it every day seems like all day, I should say, seems like a descent. But on the other hand, it's not a descent. You cannot have intimacy all day. If you have intimacy all day, you're not going to have that additional yearning, additional power, that strength and power and yearning that comes from the retreat, the separation. Beautiful.
So that kind of enforces the human participation, the same way as a broken tablet.
Because we're broken, because people are not consistent. People are going to fail. Right? So the first guy who says it's positive, he says, you're going to go to the space of the temple and you're going to escape your human frailties and you're going to become holy and godly and you're going to be surrounded by the divine environment and everything is going to be wonderful. But the other one emphasizes, no, we're human. If we're human, it's temporary. There's nothing we can do that would be consistent. We fall, we get up again. We even the righteous person will fall 7 times before he can stand still. In other words, before he can stand erect and reach his goal. Because that's the way we proceed. We are fault. We do have faults. Now the question is that Is that negative, or is that, like the Hasidic says, is that a deeper positivity, like the Hasidic philosophy says?
And also that the basic polar opposites give meaning. I mean, death, gives meaning to life, and Monday, Tuesday through Friday gives meaning to Shabbos.
Correct.
Yeah.
If
You
had
need
Shabbos-
both.
If you had Shabbos all week, it's like having vacation all year.
Correct.
It's nice if you can get the job, but ultimately the meaning of growth happens when the thing is not consistent, right?
Correct.
The Kabbalist writes, "Tainug tmidi einay tainug." Consistent pleasure is not pleasure by definition. Very deep the concept. Consistent pleasure is not pleasure.
100%. Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Wonderful.
Rabbi,
Shabbos to everybody.
oh, Rabbi,
Yes.
just great class today.